I'm Eliot Brown, and you're listening to Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.
Well, greetings, Cap fans. Welcome to episode 195 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I'm Rick Verbanis. I'm your host. And as always, I'm joined by the best gosh darn co-host out there. His name is Bob Lucius. And this is the part where I mix it up a little bit. Oh, Bob, a map is the greatest of all epic poems. Its lines and colors show the realization of great dreams.
I have no idea where you're going with that. Vasco da Gama. Amerigo Vespucci. I don't know.
I didn't expect you to get this one. This is a quote by Gilbert H. Grosvenor, who is the founding editor of National Geographic magazine.
Ah, okay.
And considering our guest today, who has drawn a few different maps for Marvel and DC, I thought it was relevant because of the quote itself, right? He's saying a map is the greatest of epic poems. Its lines and colors show the realization of great dreams. And I think that's what our guest does today. I think our guest, Eliot R. Brown, who is a renowned technical artist and writer for Marvel and DC and others. And he has done some amazing things where he has been tasked with taking the great dreams, the great creativity, and making them real.
Yeah.
And he has done that with his maps. He's done that with his buildings. He's done that with his vehicles, his weapons, his machinery. And I just can't wait to talk to him.
Oh, we grew up on this stuff, Rick, right? I mean, when you're flipping through the comics, right? And then you get to that page where there's an architectural drawing or technical drawing for something, and you just sit and you look at it, right? And you study every detail of it, every widget and gear and knob.
I know, right?
Right?
Like, so here's Captain America 425, which was a few special things about this. Actually, this was the kicking off fighting chance. Remember that when Steve Rogers, the whole super soldier serum problem. It's the first issue of Dave Hoover's long run on Captain America, written by Mark Grunwald. Oh, and it's got that shiny bossed cover, which they did back then.
Yeah.
But in the back, there's some cool pinups of Cap and Diamondback and so on. But man, getting lost in things.
Yeah.
How can you not get lost going through this 2-page diagram of Captain America's Brooklyn Heights headquarters?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, look, I got to put my readers on to read it
these days.
But I mean, I can't imagine what Eliot Brown had to do to put this together. But here you go. You have Captain America's room next to Moon Hunter's room. Remember Moon Hunter? Next to Fabian's room. And then you have the kitchen, the guest room, the Stars and Stripe hotline, computer workstation. And that's just one floor. And then you have all these other floors and the detail that has gone into the Fabian's workshop and the gym and this stuff. I enjoyed the heck out of it.
Right. You're flipping through, you're reading each page, and then you get to those pages and you just linger, right? You linger. It could be an hour. You're sitting there lingering. And I don't know about you, but as a kid, 12, 13, 14, I really loved to draw like vehicles, and I used to draw forts, like, because I used to build forts out in the woods with my friends, right? And I would draw like imaginary multi-level forts, just a kid's version. And then when you stumble across something like that in one of your comics, you're like, oh my God. Right.
Yeah.
So this is I can't wait to talk to this guy because I feel like we know him, right? But like I feel like maybe some of the younger generations not as familiar with his work, and they absolutely should be, because his work has informed so much in our universe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, he was like quintessential in that book, as a writer. He wrote a lot of it. And then of course all the technical drawings, right? And for Cap fans out there, he did Cap's shield. He did Falcon's wings. He did Cap's motorcycle, Cap's van, Cap's Quinjet.
The hotline.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just for Captain America. Let's not even talk about Iron Man's armor and Iron Man's briefcase and
Nick Fury's weapons, right? The helicarrier, all these wonderful.
Deathlock's gun, like it's just so cool stuff, right? And also he's amazing with the camera, right? He did a lot of photo covers. So like the one we covered with the Marvel team up, right? Which had Captain America and Spider-Man, on the rooftop.
Right.
He did that as well as probably like a dozen other covers.
Yeah.
Do you remember that cover for Fantastic Four, which was just Doctor Doom's mask with the lights coming out of the eyes?
Right.
Or Punisher being all bandaged up on the head.
Dazzler. Right. He did a couple Dazzler covers. Yeah.
Or Peter Parker in the Spider-Man outfit, but he has his mask off and a photographer's taking a picture of him.
Yep.
Yeah, that was our guest today. That was Eliot R. Brown.
Yeah. All right. I look forward to hearing how he did those covers, where the ideas came from. And I want to know more about his background because, like I said, he's you don't see him a lot out on the convention scene, right? But he was so instrumental in so much of what we enjoyed.
Yeah. Just I hope we can get into some of the stories of because he was with the Marvel Bullpen, in the 70s and the 80s and freelancer in the 90s. I want to get into some of those stories behind the stories, and he worked very closely with Mark Grunwald. So I can't wait to ask him about that.
Yeah.
So Bob, I had an idea.
Okay.
I had an idea for a concept for a show that would be sort of like a, like we've had in the past, we've had listeners call in with questions, like a mailbag. But I wanted to gamify it a little bit. And what do you think? Did you ever do when you were little or younger, teenager, whatever, and play the Would You Rather game?
Sure. Right. Yeah. That's making the rounds again, I think.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So,
like TikTok.
Would you rather X or would you rather Y?
Right.
And I don't know. I thought it'd be fun, put it up there to our listeners and see what kind of questions we get, like the one that pops into my mind. Right. Bob, would you rather have, if for the same dollar amount, would you rather have a Captain America Golden Age comic in whatever condition that value would equal to, or an piece of original art to one of your favorite Captain America comics of all time?
Interesting.
Don't answer now.
No, I'm not going to answer now.
Yeah. But something like that, or it could even be something like, would you rather see Captain America kiss Deathlock? Or would you rather see him, mud wrestle Death? I don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I get the concept.
We could be silly, whatever, fun.
Sounds fun. All right, I like it. I'll have to. I'll myself.
I'll put that out there. I'll put that out there in the Facebook group. All right. Should we get to our guest?
Yeah, let's bring him in, for goodness sakes.
When comic fans see our guest's work, they definitely recognize the material, if not the name. Eliot R. Brown may be best described as a technical artist and writer, although his skills as a photographer have graced many comic covers. When Marvel or DC needed to have a layout of the Avengers Mansion or the Baxter Building or Gotham City, or they wanted to see the design schematics for Iron Man's armor or Wolverine's skeleton, or the armory for Punisher or G.I. Joe, Eliot was their go-to man. He was pivotal as a co-writer for the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. And Cap fans may recognize Eliot's schematics for Cap's shield, or the Falcon's wings, which was in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, or designs for Cap's Brooklyn Heights headquarters, or his Quinjet, Freedom's Flight, among many others. We are very excited to get into his time working in Marvel's Bullpen, or as a freelancer in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Eliot, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Rick, Robert, pleasure to be here.
I got to say, when I was younger and came across one of your schematics, like the Fantastic Four Baxter Building or G.I. Joe's Pit, I could get lost for hours just reading through all the incredible detail.
That's very nice, because that was my hope. I really wanted to set it up so you could walk around in the place.
And you could see the painstakingly details that were provided. And I will say, in recent time, in the very same way, when I visit your blog, which is eliotrBrown.com, I can get lost for a long time just reading about the stories behind the women and men at Marvel during the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Oh, the dames.
And I highly encourage our listeners to check your blog out for some fun
Thank you. So do
and
I.
enlightening readings.
More information than you could possibly hope for from anybody else, and pictures.
Yeah, there's a lot of great autobiographical stuff in there too, Elliot. I got to tell you, I was heartbroken along with you when I read about your tragedy of when you moved cross country to LA and had to throw out all those comic books. Yeah, I know they probably don't want. I'm bringing bad memories there with those comics, right? The Hulk and the Amazing Fantasy.
No. More than that. You picture World Color Press in the middle of Ohio. And at the end of this giant thing, the boxing machine is wrapping up these things, and it's coming down the conveyor belt and going right into a truck and driving straight to the store. No, go straight to my mother's office.
That's amazing. Yeah.
We would bring them home unopened from the end of the printing press and say, "Here you go, little Elliot. Here you go. Have some comic books." And I'd pull out a dozen number ones.
That's crazy.
Untouched by human hands, untouched by air. It still smelled of the printing press hot oil. And no, little Elliot, we have to abandon all those. We can't take all those comic books. Are you crazy? We're supposed to throw them away. Yeah, indeed. All of them, multiples. Yeah, unopened. Nah, yeah. Sure.
Well, you headed out to LA, but you wrote that about 6 months later, you were back in New York City. And you found your way to the Manhattan High School of Art and Design.
Yep.
So how did you get from the Manhattan High School of Art and Design to Marvel?
Okay. It's a sheer nepotism. My mother, my aforementioned mother, worked at the ad agency that Marvel kicked out of the building and made a deal with. And these sharp guys signed a contract with Marvel where they had all the spaces that magazine management and Marvel Comics used for advertising. So they had them for a fixed fee, and they could charge whatever, they paid Marvel a certain amount of money, and then they could take whatever the market would bear. And they also started national advertising in the probably around the time we're discussing. And so my mother was in touch with the production guys at Marvel all the time, every day. Got to know them very well. And when, what was that guy's name? Tom Viola. He was their stat man for years. He quit and they needed a stat man pronto. I had just come from working at a real ad agency, for newspapers and such and magazines. And I learned how to run their crazy stat camera. Now, nobody needed to know that the stat cameras were wildly different. But I was an amateur photographer and very serious about gear. So figuring out the camera at Marvel was no big deal. And it was an all-enclosed unit, which was wonderful because you didn't need a darkroom or anything. It was quite impressive.
Can you tell us a little bit? I mean, because we see this, on eBay, places like that. There
Yeah.
are old stats, right,
Yeah.
left over. Like, what is that process like? Where does that fit into the production process?
Well, this is before xerography was common. You guys, you whiz bang kids with your fax trollas and your television sets. These things were there were a little camera and darkroom all in a big box. It was about the size of a floor sweeper in a store. And it you had a safe box, a safe light box where there was papers of different sizes stored. There was a platen. There was let me see if I can. I'm missing my hands waving around. And so you'd put the artwork flat and you'd flip it up. It had a big glass table, and it was fun. It was a fun machine because you could dramatically throw this stuff around whenever anybody was watching, and they'd be very impressed, very impressed. And then when you flip the lights on, the light 4,000 watts of finger burning goodness would hit this thing, pass through an optical path that hit front surface, very expensive mirrors to clean and replace. And don't ask me how I know. And then it would bounce up to the glass where you could dial in any percentage you needed. It was 50 to 200% on the machines that I used, and that's just it. You made it. The biggest difference was in the good old days. Stewie, who was the stat operator for the rest of the place, his camera was famous. Okay, in the good old days, back in the 30s and the 1930s and 1940s, there was the photographic process was one way. You showed it a white light and it turned that area black. So if you had a piece of black artwork, it would leave a white mark behind, and the white area would turn it black. So it would reverse the image. And if you wanted it to be a useful image, which was once again back to black lines on white background, you had to take a second photostat, literally, of the first one. So yes, you had to run it through the processing tanks. You had to make sure it was dry, and then you stick it back on the glass, and you take another photograph of it, another stat of it. And our innovation, by the time my camera system came along, which was called the POS1 system by the Graphic POS1 Camera Corporation, anyway, something like that, was that it had paper that took care of the reversal process for you. You would get a black and white original of a black and white. I mean, a black and white copy of a black and white original, and that was the beauty part. Why would you do that? It was so that, well, just as I showed you, this is a full sheet of artboard, which would normally be shrunk down to a comic book size. It is 60% or some 56%, something like that. And so this piece of artwork, and I worked this large so that I could stuff more detail in because I'm nutty. That's the biggest problem. I just had to keep cramming stuff in. I hate tire treads. I hate them. I hate them. I hate bricks. I hate tire treads, and I hate trees, and horses too. I don't like horses. And so I worked this large, but I could heavy up the line a little bit because I knew it would be shrunk down. And when you shrink things down, they get tighter. They get the black and white, the contrast is higher. So that's the beauty part of having a stat camera, because then this gets turned into on the printed page, the page is like that, and the artwork is just across the top. So it's shrunk quite a bit, but you don't need it much larger than that. Photostat paper, okay, way back in the good old days, Superman #1. When they colored Superman #1, for some reason, the coloring guides had to be the same size as the printed page. So, and it's somewhat true to this day. If you don't do something with Photoshop or any of the coloring programs, you need to have the artwork. You need to have the coloring guide done at the same size as the printed page. And exactly why that is, I can't say. You'd think they'd be able to work larger and shrink it down too, but it's expensive. I mean, working with negative film is expensive. And how they do it, well, this shouldn't turn into a coloring lecture or the production technology lecture, but basically a photostat camera was the only way to shrink the artwork down to the printed size. So you would get a piece of colored, white, black art on white that you could watercolor on, or do anything. You could use anything that would make the colors make sense to the person doing the separating. Actually, I picked the wrong thing. Superman #1 was in a point in time in history when it was colored at random by the separators, by the engraving house. Which begs the question: who designed Superman's costume? Some bum in the middle of Bridgeport, Connecticut, doing the separations, or did somebody suggest, oh, let's make that red? No, not magenta red. No, let's make it yellow and red. Or did somebody just say, well, red and Captain America, another great idea. That was around the same time and when they first did it. So did somebody else do it? I think Simon told me personally that he handed in the coloring with the original artwork to Martin Goodman when he presented it with Kirby. So
Bob, did you just catch that little name drop he just did?
I did. Yeah, that was a good name. 2 name drops at that. Yeah.
I was in a very fortunate position. I traveled with Brad Elliott, who was this crazy maverick reporter guy, a comic fan, and an investigative reporter, very bright guy. And he pitched the idea of a comic, a coffee table book about comics, and it was right at the time when Marvel had been bought. And I traveled with him all around the country in a mind-bendingly difficult task. I carried 11 boxes of equipment, a 4x5 view camera, and taking pictures of comic books and going to various collections. But I had a different purpose to this. Anyway, so one of the things we did was we met with Joe Simon in his studio, which was on 57th Street at the time. And we were there for 3 or 4 hours, and it was like being in heaven talking to this guy. And the bad part was that he was just about ready to sell his book. So he didn't want to give all the goodies away because he had his book, The Comic Makers, I think is what he called it, which is actually a really wonderful book. You guys owe it to yourselves to read it if you have not. And anybody out there who should know about the history of comics and how it treats the creators should find this book. It's absolutely heartbreaking and fascinating, almost heroic in its content for what Simon and even Kirby went through to become what they are. But that's the story that Joe told us, that that we were actually, Brad Elliott was in New York trying to find the court records of the time when Simon and Kirby sued Marvel for ownership, creator ownership of Captain America, because of that story where he had come in with the finished artboards and the coloring all wrapped up in a bundle in a rubber band and dropped on Goodman's desk. So he that's his claim to. That's just hearsay, not actionable. So don't sue me.
Yeah, that Brad Elliott book, by the way, is still available. I did look on Amazon. It's you can still get it.
Unfortunately, yes, Brad was muscled out at the last moment, and Les Daniels took over. Now, Mr. Daniels is a perfectly decent writer, a little more agreeable than Brad was. If you catch me.
I got the drift. Yeah.
Okay. And it's a perfectly reasonable book, I suppose. It doesn't have the Brad, as a journalist, was insistent that the quotes stay the same as what the people said. That's kind of why they're called quotes. But the people on staff and Mr. Daniels agreed that the quotes could be, changed a little bit here and there, edited or stuck together, spliced. And I'm sure it's still very readable, very legible. But it's not necessarily what anybody said out loud to the recorder. But anyway, very interesting times. And I treasure a lot of those stuff, a lot of those crazy memories. There's a lot of you think you've got a lot of toys back there, buddy. Oh no. There's some really wild people out there.
Yeah.
And they've got stuff. The one thing I regret, it's perverse because I never smoked in my life. My mom smoked, but I don't think it was a standard issue item because people brought in a lot of samples. There was this ashtray with the Spider-Man logo right in the middle of it. great big stinking ashtray, huge, with a gold trim around it. Stan had one in his office for years. He still had it. He had it in California the last time I saw it, and it was just gorgeous. It had the logo and the Spider-Man logo right in the middle. Of all the things I have coveted, and I hardly ever stole anything enough, because I just don't, because it seems like it might be wrong, but that's when I should have.
Yeah.
Who knew? Who knew? It'd be the rarest of birds.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to get back to,
Yes.
again, a fascinating blog, right?
Thank you.
To check that out. And you, and getting back to some of those crazy stories too. You've written a few blog posts remembering and paying tribute to the legendary Mark Grunwald.
Yes.
And especially for us Cap fans, Gru has a special place in our hearts. And we've had his wife, Catherine Shore Grunwald,
Big
on the
sweetheart.
show a couple of times to discuss his legacy.
Stunningly beautiful, inside and out.
She's a very lovely lady.
She is
very lovely lady.
She started off as a model. She should have been a supermodel, but big kid.
So what are some of your favorite memories of Gru, and what role did he play in your career at Marvel?
It's fairest to say that Mark was my champion at the time. He was the guy. If he had an idea in his head, he said, "Oh, let's talk it over with Eliot and let him draw it up," which was really, that's and we were friendly enough so that if he said, "Here's an idea, can you do something with this?" and I said, "Yes," I'd sit down, I'd draw it. I'm not worried about money. That's another detail. We weren't really worried about money. It sounds funny because I was just on Facebook not 5 hours ago. Somebody was talking about how the assistant editors weren't being paid for overtime. And the reason for that was that Mike and I were working 24 hours a day. And, a mere 7 or 8 of them were for the office, and the rest of it was for Gruing, actually, working on Marvel Universe. And we were regularly putting in vouchers for hundreds of hours of overtime every week. And that was the only time we thought of it. I mean, we did the first 3 books on the arm. We did it for free. I mean, free. We got meals out of Gurney, but that was it. Because he could actually, get reimbursed for the food outlet. And you go to Smiler's and get a bucket of fried chicken and some cheese. It was, we weren't living high on the hog. Except we rather liked macaroni and cheese and fried chicken.
Right.
Okay, Grunwald. Didn't worry about money. Didn't worry about credit. It was different back then. We were all together, shoulder to shoulder. Mark didn't. It's not as though Mark expected this behavior, but he engendered it. He would give us his time, and we would give him our time. Is probably the best way to put it. It's harder to explain. He was a good ringleader. He had a preposterous knowledge of every character, both houses. He had full runs of both houses, which is quite a statement and quite a big pile of comics. He had so many comics of both houses that he had to leave hundreds of comics behind at the home. So we drove across country with him in his family station wagon. We flew there on his dime. We met the family, had a really bad piece of food from his mother, but she's gone now. She can't defend herself. And then we drove back with the station wagon full of comics. And it was Dave Wohl, Howard Mackey, and myself, and Grooney at the wheel. And we, I don't think any of the rest of us had driver's licenses because we all lived in New York City. And Gruenwald is the only one that had it. So he drove. We went through 24 hours straight, just driving back from Wisconsin. But we had fun. We were yakking up a storm the whole time. He insisted we go to the A&W root beer outlet and buy the giant gallon of root beer with the one with the screw on top and the thing that comes out and you can stick it in your mouth and attach it to your lapel and drive. And drink for 24 hours. That's the kind of, and a box of donuts, 2 dozen donuts. And that was our meal for at least half the trip.
Talk about sugar high.
We were younger.
We get away with that, yeah.
Anyway, that's the kind of silly stuff that Mark was good for. There's something that so I recently 2007, Marvel comes out of bankruptcy. They're very nice. They get in touch with me. They want me to do the Marvel Atlas. I get 10 pages. Great. I ask for some reference. I get a thick clutch of gibberish, dozens of images, all from all over the history. And I'm trying to look at this stuff and trying, what am I looking at here? I got to understand this. Whatever I'm seeing, it's not making sense. And that's when it hit me. Peter Sanderson, arguably an eidetic genius. The funniest thing about Peter is he knew everything cold, and yet he would say, yes, I believe Drizzle Man in issue 117 on page 7, panel 4, he said such and such, but don't quote me. I should check the reference. Okay, that's our buddy Peter. He was that kind of crazy. Peter Gillis, the two Peters of Doom, and occasional researchers like George Olszewski, a major league collector and writer and contributor to Grunwald's work. I think he contributed to Marvel Age. No, not Age. Marvel Saga.
Okay. Yeah, that was that was cool series.
Yeah, pretty good series. And these guys, they handed me one picture. The picture. That's all I needed. 2, if there was a detail on the side they wanted me to see. And I realized what a bunch of mad geniuses these guys were. They were that good, as opposed to the new guys who were bad at what they were doing and confusing and misleading. And it took me a while to sort it out and to basically ignore what they showed me and figure out my own reference. But that's another story. So that's the kind of efficient Grunwaldian methods he could employ. He just knew everything, and he knew the right people. That's the best part. If he'd have an idea, the Quinjet is a good example. I wish I had the artwork for that. I go in the office, I sit down. They show me a picture of John Byrne's Quinjet. I say, "Oh, I see it all. It's right there." So he's introducing the character. It's the right image. Great, I got that. Then they tell me what they wanted to do. Sit down with a pad of paper, take some notes. It should do this. It should do that. It should do this. Blah blah blah. Great. Done. 10 minutes. Done. And I go, okay, here's the thing about the Quinjet. Like every other jet in the Marvel Universe, it does too much. Way too much. It floats along. It hovers. It can do Mach 3. It can hold 7 people in a big open canopy. It's got 7 engines, not 5. I couldn't stuff 5. I couldn't make 5 do what it needed to do. So don't look too closely, but it's got 7 engines. So there you go. That's the secrets behind the comics. Okay.
So, your work on the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, which started to come out in 1984, and then the subsequent deluxe edition, of course, are legendary, right? I mean, fans love them.
Good.
So among all of the technical drawings you created, so for example, in issue 15, we get to see Cap's shield, and there were Cap's motorcycle and Falcon's wings, and later on we got to see. The van and we saw, I mean, tons of great stuff, right? And of course, that's just scratching the surface of the things that you did for Cap, right?
Yes.
Tons of drawings across the whole 15-issue series, that first one. So, like, did you have a lot of leeway to pick what you wanted, or were these assignments that Gru gave you?
These were assignments.
You got to do these.
It's hard enough. There were 6,000 characters at the time. Now there's 8, if you can believe that Marvel officially recognizes. And I'm not the world's biggest fan. I'm good in the Silver Age. I'm good from Spider-Man and Fantastic Four and X-Men 1 onward for about 4 or 5 years, and that's it. That's the end of my involvement. But I remember it all very well. So we were lucky in that a good deal of what I did was founded in the old stuff, to the point where I could find I could spot mistakes in what was being told to me and go look it up myself in the library that I actually worked right around the corner from. I mean, the comic book library, the bound volume room. Or Gruenwald, and I would just talk things over, and he'd say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and it was great. He laid out the book for me basically. He said, "Well, I sometimes I think, I mean, I think the only thing that shouldn't have been done was a full page for Doctor Strange's mansion, because now I think it's sloppy drawing. Even if I had a plan in mind back then, I used a 3-point perspective where I distorted it. I said, "Oh, this is going to look very cosmic," and then I'm 3/4 of the way through it. I said, "Yeah, this doesn't look good at all." But I'm not stopping. I'm not starting over again. Anyway, yeah, stuff like that.
All right.
So when you
Gertie
are working on a schematic of a famous building like that, or
Mhm.
or equipment or weapons or whatever, where do you get your inspiration or your references? Because this is pre-internet. Did you start with a mechanical eye or a more creative eye that became mechanical?
I'd have to retreat to somebody else's genius. Stanley Kubrick was talking to the guys who were designing the spaceships for 2001, and they were protesting, "Yeah, but Stanley, this isn't real. These are just goofy spaceships that we're doing. These are the guys who would usually work for NASA. So what they did was boring and not very interesting." But he says, "Yes, but it's an informed imagination." And that phrase resonated with me. Especially for buildings, I wanted to be an architect as a kid. My best friend is still an architect. One of my 3 best friends is an architect, and he and I, we literally, most kids were out there doing whatever they do on the street. He and I would be redrawing stuff and doing Frank Lloyd Wright tracings and talking about architecture and designing. In fact, somebody mentioned the Falcon. You mentioned the Falcon's wings earlier, Rick. You were Robert A. Heinlein had written a short story about "The Menace from Earth" is the name of the short story. Basically, a young girl with a beautiful woman showing up, and they're one of the things is in the bubble air cavern that we're going to find on the moon, full of air. You could fly wings. You could use mechanical wings and fly around in this cavern. And we were so entranced by that idea as kids, and I mean, must have been 14 or something like that, that we designed the wings to the best of our ability. We looked up birds in the Encyclopedia Britannica, and we looked at the bone structure and the winglets and all the different parts and regions of the wing that fold and move, and we copied them. So when it came time for me to do the Falcon's wings, I said, "Wait a minute, I'll just find that drawing." And James had it, my buddy James Sanders, FAIA. He's a big mucky muck. And I literally took it and I redid it so that it was more. We couldn't figure out how it worked to make motors and such back then because we were young, dopey kids. But by the time I got to the Falcon, I could figure out where the power plants had to be. So I read Scientific American as a kid. I read National Geographic. I read American Cinematographer. I read Scientific American. Did I just say Scientific American? I read Scientific American a lot, and popular mechanics, popular science. Just this is what I spent my time. Always interested in science fiction and how things worked, and those were the backstories that informed what I was trying to draw. Plus, everybody used to say, "Well, there's never a bathroom in any of the buildings." Well, no. There's bathrooms in all of my buildings. There's also security elevators. There's fire towers. There's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning.
Man, I tell you, I'm looking at something right now. I'm looking at in Captain America 425. You have in here the Brooklyn Heights headquarters, right? And so
yeah.
you got into so much detail in here. So yeah, you not only talk about bathrooms and stuff, but you have escape tunnels and
Well, we all got to have escape tunnels. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
Don't you have some? Come on, you guys.
Well, I've been digging one. I'm not done yet.
Yeah. It's a big job for just a guy. I know.
Yeah. Every time I start, my wife fills it in. So it's frustrating.
I'm not going to give you any advice you don't need. Okay. Yeah, I know. Okay. So I lived in Manhattan. I grew up in Manhattan. I had lots of friends in Brooklyn. I always had an eye for architecture and rooftops and hidden voids. I'm always looking for secret tunnels and secret doorways. Sometimes I find them. And I must have a dozen books about the underground world of New York City and how it's changed over the decades. And I'm just endlessly fascinated by the subways and building basements. And did you know Park Avenue is actually a covered shed? It's humped up in the middle because that's where the trains go under. It's open. It's completely open. And it's open all the way up to 103rd Street, where the trains come out of the ground. And Park Avenue is called a Park Avenue because when it was covered over, the entire roadway was a park. There was no vehicular traffic except going across it. So the whole area is open. In fact, if you ever actually they got rid of the Union Carbide building, which is right on 44th Street, 47th Street, and the first floor of the Union Carbide building is a story above. The ground floor where you walk in, you take escalators up to the first floor, and the reason why is because below it, it's open. It's all held up on I-beams and girders for whatever that is, 30 feet.
Yeah.
And I've been down there because I was a precocious child and I would run around in the wrong places in Grand Central Station and go running off onto the loop around track, and you can lose yourself in there, which is a lot of fun.
Well, we're talking about the bottom. Let's talk about the top, because Bob and I talk about this a lot in Manhattan.
Yes.
Is it a prerequisite for every one of these heroes to have a skylight that opens up so that the hero can somehow, go through the skylight and,
yes.
Trump,
was
that
simple.
Something that was a prerequisite in any of your?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
All of them. I for some reason I had a particular fascination for skylights because most buildings that have skylights, well, it's the top floor. And I lived in an apartment, couple of apartments, but the one I spent a lot of time in had this wonderful little funky skylight. It was really small. It was it was a square hole in the ceiling that went up about 2 feet. That was the roof. That was the whole structure of the roof. And then above it was this little funky thing. I'd only been up there once or twice because you had to stand on the top step of a ladder to even clean it. And I'm tall. I'm 6'3", and so it was scary getting up that high. And how it was built was fascinating to me as well. It's all metal and chicken wire glass. And most of the skylights in Manhattan were painted over with tar during World War II, so as not to alert the Wehrmacht where to drop bombs. Not sure how well it worked, but not sure how far the Wehrmacht got over the Luftwaffe, got over towards America. Anyway, that's why if you ever look at those buildings, you'll see even now most of the skylights are still covered over with something black or badly scraped away. Black tar, not paint. Tar.
Huh. I did not
they were serious.
know that.
Oh yeah, it's a weird detail, a weird thing in America. In Manhattan and Brooklyn, especially, where there's plenty of those still left. There's lots of them. They're big, messy things too. But I used to love the look of those things, and that's the trouble. I have an eye for the detail that means I'm gonna always have a sore back at the end of a drawing session because I can't stop.
Now you mentioned before, you said you hate tires, you hate bricks, you hate trees, you hate horses.
Yeah.
What was the most challenging piece that you've ever illustrated?
My magnum opus, which I say with all immodesty, is the Baxter Building in Fantastic Four, whatever it is, 353 or 8 or something like that. And for some reason, I was always sucked in to the Baxter Building. I worked at Marvel. I have two stretches where I worked at Marvel. One was in 1974. I was there working those hard nepotism moves. I was working in the satisfaction department, which is where kids would send in little coupons and checks and such and money and get a book or a toy or something that we had, a poster. Mm-hmm. And I'd process all that. So I did that for a year. But while I was there, I went over. I was up on 9 in the executive hell, and I would go downstairs to the 6th floor, and I'd visit the bullpen and some of the editors, and you get chummy a little bit. And I said, well, okay, I want to do the Fantastic Four. So I took some artboard because you were encouraged to be creative, and I drew some plans up. I did plans on paper, and then I drew them up, and I brought them into the editor. At the time was Jim Sauerkraut, who remembers this. And he's a good friend now, and I do hold it against him. And he said, "I didn't ask you to do this." No, I said, "Yeah, but isn't it interesting that it's got all this stuff in it?" And, I just did the plans, and then when Grunwald came along, I redid them, and there was the Baxter Building that appeared in the Marvel Universe book, the original run, and that served as the foundation for the Baxter Building drawing that I did in FF, whatever it was, the 50th anniversary, 35th anniversary, whatever that was. So I had lots of thinking in the matter, and I gave, what else do you give a mad scientist? You give him a particle accelerator, and you give him an automatic robotic assembly device, so you can put robots together with robots and build things, and you have an electron beam, direct write chip manufacturing facility built in because you're a mad scientist. I spent a solid week penciling it, and then a solid, and because the deadline was coming up, a solid week, 7 days in a row, 10 hours a day, inking it. And it was very difficult. It was very difficult. I had a thing. It's hard to do this without pantomime and good examples, and I'm not really prepared. But I was taught several methods of doing perspective rendering when I was in High School of Art and Design. I had a gifted teacher, Professor Erwin Muller, who was a genius. Dr. Muller, a doctor of landscape architecture. Who offers a degree in landscape architecture? But he had one, and he showed us how to do stuff, and he showed us how to get more from a piece of artboard than you would think was possible. I think I talk about it on the blog. I wrote about this, and I may have taken some pictures that were far more evocative than what I'm about to tell you. But I could figure out the direction I wanted in the building, and then extend the lines off, and with a couple of mechanical gadgets, I could sweep a T-square head up and down the board in 3 axes. So there was a very nice subtle 3-point perspective, and because I had done so much work on the floor plans, I could translate everything to just the way I wanted it in proportion, because I wasn't about to do an actual drawing. I mean, an actual measured perspective rendering of this. That was a big job. That was a very big job. And I'll tell you, I only got 2 page rates, which was fine, but I was hoping to be paid more, because sometimes you can do that. You ask an editor to do something, and maybe they'll do a little something extra, but not this time. But that's not what bothered me. Stan, he opens up the book. He's in the office. He's going to sign all these covers. And I said, Stan, I did this right. And Stan goes, oh, that's something. He was not impressed. He was alarmed that so much work had gone into this, and he didn't. Stan, God bless Stan, but he didn't care. He didn't, was this Cap punching the Red Skull? No, this. I'm drawing doorknobs and control panels. He doesn't care about that stuff.
Yeah.
And I wasted way too much time doing it, which he could see because he's a professional. So that's the one. That's the standout in my career. It was okay. I'll tell you. So, as I mentioned, I was doing 10 hours worth of inking every day. Sometimes, at the beginning, I started off with 12 because I was stronger, and at the end, in the middle, my back was going. But if you ever see that page, if you take a look in the Richards bedroom, you'll see a statue, which is the Fantastic Four stepping out of the spacecraft that had been sculpted, in my mind, by Alicia Masters, the blind sculptress.
Very cool.
Daughter of the Thing, and I, daughter of the puppet master, and mad puppeteer. It doesn't matter. And I'm starting to think of the page and the scene, and I'm down there like this. I'm doing I'm using a pen, a technical fountain pen, and I'm trying to get this little, and I'm doing. The Thing was in rock, and Sue Storm was in glass, and I can't remember what else I did. And Fantastic Reed was in rubber, and it was all stretched out. And I'm literally, I'm starting to cry.
Oh no!
Yeah. Because these guys
tears
come out
on
of the
top of paper.
On top, I know. Believe me, I had to. I was getting all choked up because the pain of discovering their powers that washes over them. And I'm there in a second. There's the rocket and the thing. My wife continues to mock me, laughing at me. She will imitate the last time I told this story to her, but now I tell the story to you, and you can make fun of me too, because I'm telling you know what? I was a kid. I was moved by the Thing, by Ben Grimm's situation. Here he is, he's in love with the girl who's in love with the mad scientist, and he was always the odd man out. And he was the guy. That was me. That was all of comicdom, as far as I knew.
That's it right there.
That's it.
It's an awesome story. I got to say, I mean, just the fact that you put in like 2 weeks worth of work, I could see it being your magnum opus. And I'll try to find an image of that so I can share it here on the video so people can see it as well as you're going through it. But thank you for sharing that. That's actually really, really cool.
Besides being the stat man and technical drawings, which are world known for, you also were involved in several photographic covers, including The Amazing Spider-Man 262, Spider-Woman 50, Dazzler 21, Iron Man 152, Fantastic Four 268, on and on and on, right?
Yeah,
and of course,
quite a number.
We covered the issue Marvel Team Up 128 in episode 188. And then you also worked with Bill Sienkiewicz on Dazzler 29's cover as well, I believe. So can you tell us a bit about how these covers came about, this idea of a photographic cover? Because, well, there were quite a few of them in the grand scheme of things. There were very few of them.
I think there's 16, maybe 16 or 17 of them total, which is a big number, maybe 15 or 14. Anyway, yes, I shot a lot of them. There were people who did it before me, and I tried very hard to bring a technically aware photographic sensibility to the job. I every time I made enough money, I would buy a different lens, for example. I had for some reason I read histories of Magnum Photo Agency, which is a world-renowned reportorial group of crazy photographers in the pre-World War II who were super famous for taking pictures, and they were the touchstone of you have personally seen almost every one of their pictures sometime, if not the picture, then a clear copy of it or homage to it. They're that good. I mentioned earlier, I read National Geographic, and I was crazy for the photography. And every once in a while there'd be an interview with the photographer, and there'd be a discussion of the photo department, the legendary photo department, National Geographic. Oh my God, I could just. And one year I worked for a dear friend of mine was a wedding photographer, and he needed a second light man. And a second light man walks off with a slave unit attached to the strobe camera, a strobe light. He's got the master strobe, and when his strobe goes off, the slave goes off. And I had to make sure that I was off at a 45-degree angle to him, no matter where he was or who he was pointing at. So I ran around and got all this. But the best part about that was that I was exposed to the high end of equipment that you could get. And if you knew how to cut corners, you could get a lot out of a little. And so I had a series of strobe units and battery packs that were unusual. And my love for them is still, I mean, the trouble is the technology has fallen by the wayside, and the batteries we've moved on to like 5 generations of battery along. But at the time, they were very good, and I could just keep blasting away for hours, which was wonderful. And the guys on staff noticed that. So when it was time to take pictures, I think the first cover I did was the Dazzler. I don't know if I did something before. I may have done something out the window for that Namor cover, where they were showing a street scene.
Yeah, right.
And I think I may have replicated that to the best of my ability. It was just a straightforward picture. Mm-hmm. That's when I learned that the printing process is unforgiving. They really, the covers are printed at 135 lines per inch, and the interior is much coarser, 85 or less. And boy, did that look bad. Picked up a lot. The guys at the separators. The cover guys were different than the interior guys at the separators, and they weren't used to dealing with film, with photographs. Black and white was one thing, color was a whole other monster, and they couldn't handle it. The Spider-Woman 50 cover is the best example. That's the world's most expensive comic book cover, as far as I can. That's what Jim Shooter said, and you should know.
It's funny. We actually had one of your actors on the show.
Oh, yeah. Bob Sharon.
Bob Sharon. He played
Werewolf.
Werewolf by Night. Yeah.
You can pick him out in the crowd. Yes, he's in there. Yes, it was a jumble of people. Ann Nesenti, Dave Wohl. Who else was in there? Bob Camp, Mark's wife, Belinda, at the time, and who else was in there? Vince Waller. Now, you may or may not know, Bob Camp was a prime animator of Ren and Stimpy, but so was Vince Waller. Vince went on to be the head man at Nickelodeon, the head man at whatever outfit did SpongeBob. He's it's funny because you meet these guys, and they're a couple of dopey guys. They're regular guys. They're funny guys, and then they turn into these powerhouses of creativity and madness. They both worked for John Kricfalusi when Ren and Stimpy was still, developing and imploding and exploding. And Kricfalusi, I think, did 6 shows that they ran over and over again for 2 years. And Bob Camp stepped in with Vince and basically did the next 46 shows. That's the kind of talent these guys are. And they even did the voices. They did screaming and yelling in the sound booth. And it's funny stuff. It's funny to know these guys in the beginning. But the place, the courtyard that we shot in with the huge arrangement of fire escapes was outside of their loft. Vince and Bob were sharing a loft space, and it was perfect. But man, was it dark in there? And I didn't bring enough strobe lights. All I can say is I was lucky. I had a good piece of equipment because it could put out its full charge was better than the guide number because it's hard to explain quickly, but it filled the area. I had a very good strobe unit for what I could afford, and I was lucky that just gave enough life. But even so, that cover had to be beaten up and rearranged. And Ron Zalmi, brilliant cover guy, brilliant artist and production guy in general. He had a giant print made of the background, and then he went in and he retouched stuff. And that's not good enough. We got Bob Larkin, super talented artist guy, painter guy, can do anything. And he goes in and he starts redrawing everybody's faces and costumes, and that's still not enough. Then they had the shots of super beautiful office babe, an executive secretary named Lynn Luckman, that Grunwald was, staring at, and all of us were. And she was Spider Woman. So I bought a brick kit, and we glued it all down to this giant piece of cardboard, a 1-inch thick piece of cardboard, because those were the days you could go to an architectural specialty house to do mock-ups. And right down the block was Charette, which was the premier architectural supply place. And okay, we go in there, buy a 4x8 foot sheet of cardboard, and muscle it back to the office, stick it on the floor, start laying the bricks down. Oh, we're running out of room. We don't have enough bricks, so we start spacing the bricks apart farther and farther. Okay, and then Lynn's gonna lie down on this thing and look like she's crawling up the wall. And you may have seen the photos. It doesn't quite bring justice to the craziness of the time. Yeah. And the best photo at the end was all of us pretending we're on the wall next to Lynn.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult for me because I took the picture and I had to trip the shutter and run like a bastard. And I was young enough to jump into position because it's a 10-second delay.
Well, I do want to encourage the listeners to go to your blog, because you've got some great blog posts about many of these photographic covers, including the Marvel team up that I just mentioned, but also it's a two-parter, the Amazing Spider-Woman one. So I mean, the Spider-Woman, it's just a phenomenal story.
All I can say is I was there, because this is one of those things where Grunwald was the ringleader for the Spider-Woman cover, but it was so multifaceted because that picture of Lynn on the wall had to be blown up and then retouched and stuck down. And it looked terrible. Could Ron not have fooled around with the perspective of it? Okay, it doesn't matter. And then Belinda, his wife, was the moth, the gypsy moth. She's flying around. No, they retouched her. It was an expensive cover, considering it was the last issue of the film.
Yeah, the last issue, which probably didn't have very many sales, right? So
nope, that was it. It was a dog in the manger, but they gave it a good send out.
Yeah. So bringing it back to Cap, because this is a Cap focused podcast.
Go ahead.
You created the technical drawing for the Quinjet, Cap's Quinjet, which is known as Freedom's Flight. Now,
Freedom's Flight.
I believe this was positioned as being done by the Wakanda Design Group.
Yes.
And so the drawing was published in Captain America Annual number 11, which I have right here. And the original conceptual design was by Kieran Dwyer, and but you took it to a whole new level, right? He had this fantastical concept, and then you had the role of making it more realistic. And so, and I'll put this up on the screen, but this was this was it right here, right? And so what can you talk a little bit about what features did you add?
I forget if that's the one that I put a bathroom in. But I think there's one inside the cabin to the rear where you would expect to find one.
Sure,
to one side. And okay, the worst thing about most of these craft, it does too much. Just does too much. This
you do have toilet, privacy curtain.
There you go. That's all you get. That's right. And they had, the few times that we saw the interior, they had seats in it. Excuse me, this shouldn't have seats. It's a small thing. It's not a ballroom. Will you stop at this big place? You got, ay, 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 ay. And so I think the innovation, the only innovation I did was I had the wings. It was an all surface flight control system, wireless system, where the wings flexed to steer the jet. That was the big one. The next thing I did was I had read when they introduced the F-117 stealth fighter to a congressional review in somewhere in the Midwest. They had printed a flag on the bottom, and I didn't quite understand the military mind at the time because I had put a regular flat flag, and I realized I'd probably chopped off a dozen stars, and so that was bad. And I apologized to all the states involved. And but they hadn't released a picture of what they had done in real life. And what they had done was, I mean, the F-117 is a big triangular mess, and so they had slanted all of the stars and the stripes in this weird distortion. So you stretch the bottom of the flag and you squeeze the top so that all of this thing. I didn't do that. I did what I thought was better, but I was wrong, and they did the right thing. You can't get rid of the subcontractor states. That was bad. But yeah, they kept showing. And look at this, it's hovering, and you can climb down on a ladder. Mark, you know what it takes to make a jet float, don't you? Have you looked at pictures of the Harrier jet? You see it? They blow all this stuff away. You can't just swing down on a ladder, even if you're Captain America. You get cooked.
Yeah, you have the vertical thrust ducting.
Yeah, yes, I do.
Yep. I mean, it's all in here.
It's all in there. And I got really good at doing little tiny boxes, aviation electronics stuffed in there. Hid a multitude of problems I had to show. And the geometry of folding wheels, the bicycle wheels and the shapes and all of the things. I got pretty good at imitating what they're supposed to look like. But there's another pain in the neck. I throw that on the list of right after horses because I hate horses. Horses with their backwards feet.
Yeah, you've got the wheels in both the up position and the down position. You wanted to show both.
Why did I think that was important to show them both? That's what I want to know. You could see them up there. I worry about myself sometimes.
So that annual, there it is. It also has a technical drawing for Cap Shield, which of course we first glimpsed in issue 15 of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. But this one, as Rick just showed, has a nice full page schematic. But what struck me about this one was there's a little extra detail in that schematic. And you explain how the two leather straps are attached to an otherwise nearly indestructible shield.
Yeah, you gotta wonder.
It says that you were helped out by Edwin Jarvis, who contributed to the solution. Can you tell us a bit about how did you come up with that creative solution? And was it in response to some reader complaints about
we never paid attention to anybody complaining. Never, ever. They could go, whistle up a rain pipe. I always thought it was a riot. That here you have this adamantium vibranium. Does anybody remember when it was an alloy? Now it seems to be just vibranium. What happened to adamantium? Okay. We had this material that was nearly mystical in its resonance frequencies and in its resilience and rebounding off of things perfectly, which is fine. He's a driven man. He can get the feel of it. I was pretty good at frisbee myself. I was good with a fast back. I had a callus and everything. And but that strap, that leather strap, I puzzled over that for quite a while, and then I realized, it's got to be an interference fit. It's what machinists do when they put metal in metal, and they don't want to use a fastener. They heat the surrounding material up so that it expands, and then you got a couple of choices. If the nominal dimension is a tenth of an inch, and you heat it up to 1,000 degrees, the nominal dimension will now go up to a tenth plus 3 thousandths on top of it. So if you take a pin that is 10,000th of an inch so that it fits really tight when it's cool, and you take that pin and you stick it in there when the surrounding material is super red hot. When it cools off, it'll close down tight, and then you have the it's the atomic forces of the material crushing that pin. And I was hoping that would be enough. So if you are positive how hot you have to get adamantium vibranium alloy to expand to whatever you need to, an oxyacetylene torch puts out 2,400 degrees. That's not enough to melt titanium, which is 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit for you imperial guys out there. And it just seemed like that's the only way. But then you still have to put the thing in there. So I figured, well, all right, Jarvis, of all people, would have an arbor press. And an arbor press is this little thing that you crank. You can apply a great deal of force straight down on something and put a pin in. It's what machinists do. And I really had a lot of faith in Jarvis for being one of these guys. He'd figure he'd have people to talk to, and he had Mr. Stark to ask questions about. So there had to be a way to replace this thing. It's just that how'd they figure that out in World War II? That's what I want to know. So, those were the
there
days.
you have it. And
there it is.
And now we have an explanation of how you got leather straps on the back of a indestructible shield.
Indestructible. Yes.
No.
Yes. It wasn't easy.
So I have to ask, over the years,
yes,
you mentioned before about, well, I think this was off air, about going down to a convention in Florida.
Yeah.
How often? I mean, do you attend conventions as a guest?
Not a lot.
And the reason I ask is I'm curious. What is the piece that when you have been a guest at a show? What is the piece that you've done that gets the most requests for autographs?
I've never been a guest.
Oh, okay.
I have not been. I've been to a bunch of San Diego cons. I visited Atlanta Con, which was a Dragon Con. Yeah, Dragon Con.
Oh, in Atlanta, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've been to a bunch of local stuff. And I would go. I'd buy my way in, and sometimes I'd have a table. Going to a convention, if you know an awful lot of the people there, it's distracting because you generally see them in the office, but sometimes a couple of years go by and terrible things happen to them. You don't necessarily want to distract them from their job, which is to make money. And I'm not that secure in my position in comics because I have a body of work, but it's very small, and so nobody has asked me for any specific thing. I also didn't believe, and maybe this isn't exactly the venue for this sort of thing, but anyway, I believe that I was taught at the hands of legal department that you are not supposed to make copies of your artwork because that infringes on Marvel's intellectual property and their ability to make a profit off of their characters and their material. And so all you can do as a freelancer is sell your artwork once. And then that's it. Yeah, I guess you can buy it back and sell it again, but right. The idea is it's a thing to be sold, not to be duplicated. And I went to a San Diego convention, and I was going to go to hawk my website, actually, to hawk the blog. And I was just going to walk around, hand out cards to everybody, which was a pretty funny idea when I got a load of it. Hadn't been to a con in a long time in San Diego, and gosh, the previous time I went to the convention was in '99 when you could just park across the street and walk in, buy a ticket. I know, isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Different, yeah.
Yeah, a little different. And so I also was a little more addressable. There were maybe only 5,000 vendors as opposed to 150,000 vendors. Anyway, So I did make prints of stuff, and I did bring them with me, and I sold about 4 of them. That's not exactly
surprising.
You know what? I didn't
You did.
advertise. I got into the artist alley listing, not even the main one. I got into the second one because I didn't even think of it. I'm talking to these guys, and they're saying, "Oh no, Marvel doesn't enforce that." Oh, really? Is that right? Marvel doesn't enforce this stuff. Oh, okay. You say so, buddy. I'll point them to you, and you tell me to cease and desist. And so I made a bunch of copies of some full size. And I had a crazy idea. Because when I get a piece of artwork, even my own stuff, I want to put it all up there. I don't want to trim. I don't want to crop in if I can. I want the whole thing. So I made full size copies, and then I got it on larger paper that I had to pay extra for, because that way people would have a giant border on all 4 sides that they could mat over, and they could have the entire book. And I thought that was very nice of me, except I carried a 50-pound box of paper with me all the way through San Diego. And then I said, well, no problem. I'm sure I'll be selling half of this stuff. I'll be carrying a little bit back. No, I brought the whole thing back.
Oh my goodness.
So that was that. So my conventions are not. There's 2 sides to a convention, as my learned colleague Mike Carlin pointed out. Conventions these days are 50 conventions, 100 conventions, but there's 2 sides to them. You should be able to bring $1,000 into the place and just buy what you want, and you'll have a nice little shopping bag of stuff at the end. Because look, this is it for us. We don't have an insurance. We don't have an insurance company. We don't have a savings plan. We don't have a 401k profit sharing device for the work we did. So whatever we got in our pockets is all we've got for the rest of our lives. And we have to make money. And so as professionals, as former professionals, and as working artists, you have to make your money. So that's one side of the business. The other side of the business now is entertainment, mass entertainment, incredible amounts of entertainment. And that's okay. That's fine. But the two mixing together, I don't know. Have you guys been to San Diego?
I have not. I've been in New York.
Oh, that's a nice little gathering of friends and intimates. No, you gotta try San Diego. You should at least do it once. It's a royal pain to get in, and it's a royal pain unless you're invited, which is a nice thing if that happens. I pitched him for doing a photo show and with a lecture, and I hadn't heard back from him so far this year, so we'll see. And you should do it. I haven't been to Mardi Gras. I hear I should go to Mardi Gras, and I'm sure it's pretty close to the same thing. My exposure to Mardi Gras is from the James Bond movies, and I think that's about as close as I wanted to come.
I think there's more beads.
Yeah, more beads. There's beads already, and the whole cosplay element is sweet and wonderful, but Lord love us, some of us shouldn't be wearing costumes.
Spandex isn't for everybody, right? Yeah,
not for everybody.
Great invention, but yeah,
I saw it. It's got its place. I might get a little worked up, so forgive me if I'm getting old. I'm a short time in it here, and I'm thinking about the past. I'm at one of the San Diego cons. I forget which one, and 3 gals are walking, and there's this black chick. She's young. She's probably got about 50, 60 pounds she shouldn't be wearing. And also what she shouldn't be wearing was a Wonder Woman costume. And I'm looking at her, and she's just walking along. She's talking to her buddies. And I'm thinking, you know what? Those are my people. Gotta love them.
They are your people.
It's just that simple.
Yeah.
So it's the big tent. The big tent for comics. You should get yourselves over there. Before it gets crazier. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, because you haven't lived or come close to death until you've been through con. San Diego.
I don't I don't like crowds. So I don't think I'll be
Neither
going.
do I.
Yeah.
But these are my people. These are your people too.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. I'm not crazy about crowds.
Well, I'll tell you, Eliot. You're obviously guys of a certain age. Rick and I, we know and love your work because it was so formative for us for many years, right? But there's a whole younger generation like those kids that you saw that may not be as familiar with your work, and they need to be because it's such amazing contributions and timeless contributions to the
timeless.
Yeah,
you know, none of those guys want to use my stuff as reference. They John Byrne immediately destroyed the Baxter Building after I finished it.
Oh, right, yes.
Put up his own. That's fine. Thank you, John. But, all right. But anyway, yes.
Yeah.
You're very kind. You really.
So I would personally, I don't know if there's any plans in the future, but I would love to see a collection of your work at some point in the future, bound.
I keep thinking, unfortunately, the best version of it is already in print. It's the Marvel Universe. I think somebody said there's a brand new one coming out, but I don't know. A brand new version of the first run of Marvel Universe. I don't know why they printed that, where in the deluxe edition was neater and better and spread out and more readable, more legible.
More stuff, right? Yeah.
More stuff. Yep. And but they did it. I got paid a lot of money for those when they came out again. I think I got paid more for the reprints than I got paid originally. I mean, that was shocking to me. I mean, you get a check for $4,000 from Marvel. You say, "Oh, bookkeeping error. Let's get this into the system and before they want it back." Holy mother!
Hey, I have a really important question for you, Eliot. Sure. I've been saving this one to the end because could be a little sensitive, but I know that in Marvel 129 there was actually a biographical introduction to you on page 21. I encourage folks to look that up, and that's the letters
Marvel. That would be Marvel Team Up 129.
Yeah, Marvel Team. I'm sorry. Thanks, Rick. And it says that you don't possess any superhuman powers, but you can cluck like a chicken and bark like a dog, and you do have the ability to whistle through your nose. And I want to confirm if these are truly skills you possess.
Now, I'm a little phlegmy as I've gotten older. I don't know how good this microphone is. Let's see.
Yep, that's it.
That is a talent.
That's remarkable.
That is quite a talent right there. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's my mutant power. That's it. It ain't much. I can draw things and I can whistle through my nose. Thank you for pulling that out. I have hardly been able to show that in public often enough. Let me see. The one trick I used to do, I think I relayed the story somewhere, maybe in print, I can't remember anymore. I drove an English teacher to drink because I'd sit there. This is when I was younger, more flexible, and everything was, better. I was in junior high school. I'm gonna try to make this work. And he's walking right by me, and he can't tell where the whistling is coming from, and he's yelling, "Stop it! Whoever's doing that whistling, stop it!" He couldn't, and I thought, this is when I learned, with great power comes great responsibility. With every great right, there can be a great wrong. There can be an evil, the flip side of the good. Because I was entranced with this in of the moment. And then I realized how much horrible thing was going on inside this man's mind. And then I found out he died of alcoholism. And years later, I said, "Oh, geez, I hope I didn't contribute to it."
It was no straight line, yeah.
I believe he was already drunk that day, but that's, I was a much younger person. That could have been aftershave.
So what else is keeping you busy lately? Is there any projects or things, anything coming up for our listeners to check out?
All right, don't tell anybody. All right, so a long time ago, when the new universe was young, And to the readers out there, the New Universe was an idea by Jim Shooter to introduce brand new comics that had nothing to do with the old universe, which is interesting right then and there, and took place in a universe with no superheroes. And this thing would happen. This energy force would crackle out of somewhere, wash over the earth, and change a few people to have superpowers. Bunch of titles. Gruenwald's DP7, Displaced Paranormal 7, was in my opinion, was arguably the best version of it all. He really he invented ideas that are still resonating today. Characters from his dream book, because he woke up every morning and wrote down his dreams, and came up with a lot of characters and plot lines from that book. But Jack Morelli, Jack, who was one of my 3 best friends, and 4 best friends. That's hard to keep track because you're supposed to have one. Jack Morelli, we worked together. He was in the bullpen. He was a letterer. He was a production guy, smarter than he will even believe of himself. And we were in the meeting, and we were the new part of the New Universe because, in the face of Tom DeFalco, Jim Shooter, Archie Goodwin, Al Milgram, those are pretty old guys. They're the old guard, but we were new, and so we came up with Jack coined the phrase Spitfire and the Troubleshooters, just as a title. No idea what it was. And so Spitfire cropped up at a point in time when I was standing on shifting ground. And from one minute to the next, I had the book, and then I didn't. And that was too bad. Because, so let me get out my little horn here and toot my own horn. I'm the only shot they have at a technically aware guy. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a specialist. I'm not a physicist. I cop to a little bit of architecture, and I can imitate stuff. I'm a good imitator. I absorb the information, and I can spit it out convincingly. But nobody else can. And when I say nobody else has. If they can, they haven't shown me. And so this book was technically oriented. These were 5 students at MIT, and 2 of my best friends went to MIT. So that sets me apart from everybody else. And so that's what. So when I was taken off the book, that was I'm still not over it. 38 years later, by the way.
Now we skipped a little bit there, right? Because you were the writer. You were the writer,
right?
Yeah, and so
and Jack and I came up with the plots. We tried to co-write, but it was very difficult. And so I wound up doing a lot of the work. He would go over it, and he started one thing, and I took it over. We still hadn't worked out the relationship, and then it was gone. So we didn't have it. We didn't have a chance. We created the character. Spitfire was also the name of the robot suit that the professor character was going to inherit from her father. It's a big, Michigas crazy story. But the book, crawled out in the shelves and died because the book, nobody wanted to have anything to do with this book, and it was just horrible. Lower tiered creative people were thrown at the project over and over and over. If you look at the credits, they're hardly the same from book to book. 13 books, which I thought was a hilarious number, but an unmerciful death at the end, when it just says, "And now Spitfire and the Troubleshooters comes to an end." That's about as dumb a way to end a series as you could possibly hope for. But I'm repitching the idea, and I'm trying to update it and make it a bit more modern. What I'm also trying to do is, we didn't know what the new universe crap was. The thing that triggered this whole BS was, we didn't know. Why were these kids? These kids evinced no superpowers. The professor didn't. The robot suit wasn't. Well, I'm going to change that. I'm going to try to make it more interesting, and it's certainly more technical, dare I say. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm going to be doing.
Well, that's
and they're
cool.
My characters. Can't have them. Nobody can have them. Anybody watching, don't start writing a brand new book. Now the truth is, I don't know what to do with the book after I finish it. If Marvel says yes, that'd be lovely. But let's just say, vanishingly small proportion
Right over to Netflix. Sounds like a good live action show.
I'll take that. Actually, it would be. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm writing it in full script mode because
Mhm.
I don't want anybody thinking for themselves. Whoever takes this book, they'll have their hands full. Let me tell you, because I provide lots of reference, which is now possible to integrate into the scripts.
Right.
What a
Well,
world.
we wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you, sir.
And
Thank you.
also, again, listeners, do go to eliotrBrown.com.
Yes, sir.
There's a
Thank you.
plethora of stories there, photos, so many cool things from the Marvel
I have no idea.
Bullpen.
Oh,
And
gee, yeah.
some wonderful stories behind the stories. So definitely check that out. And Eliot, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was my pleasure.
And
I got a lot of dopey stories to tell, which, you know.
well, we were mesmerized by them. So thank you so much.
Loved every minute of it.
I thought the images had locked up. Okay, you're mesmerized. That's better. Thank you.
All right.
My pleasure.
Thanks. All right. Well, Bob, I could talk to Eliot all day long. That was a lot of fun.
That was. He is a hoot, my friend.
Indeed.
Yeah.
He's not shy about, telling it how it was.
Yeah, he's just a charming guy. Really. I mean, so much warmth and personality. And you could tell why he gelled so well in the bullpen. I mean, he just has a great personality, and it really came through on the interview. And he's got some great stories. And like I said, I mean, he could talk for hours about some of them, and we could sit here and listen to him for hours. I'd love to have him back because he's just a wealth of memories and stories, and man, just what a fantastic episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish we could talk about the Mike Zeck story. He told us off air.
Just wonderful. Yeah.
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 but in any case, you know what? It was interesting because you had brought up, when we did the episode with the Marvel team up cover.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little we did the story panel by panel, and then in the back there's a like 3 or 4 pages that Eliot Brown wrote, which
Mm-hmm.
was a making of the cover.
Right.
And I remember you saying, wow, I always loved reading all his stuff, those schematics and things like that. And I was like, yeah, me too. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna track this guy down.
Yeah.
And I give a little surprise to Bob,
Right. It was a great surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said it to you off air. I'm so looking forward to Eliot Brown, and like he has just was so instrumental in my childhood. Those schematics and everything. I'm like a kid in a candy store tonight. And I'm telling you right now, this is probably my favorite interview of all of them, just because it was such a treat. So thank you for hunting him down.
Absolutely. I had a lot of fun, and hopefully we can have him back someday to talk about some other stories.
Yes.
So next episode, Bob, next episode, we are going back to Streets of Poison.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be Captain America 378. This is part 7 of the 7-part story. So can't wait to go through this. And I got to tell you, I don't think I've read it since 1990. So
I'm going to need to brush up myself.
I do recall something about the Kingpin and Red Skull in their underwear in a baseball field fighting.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I don't recall that, but now I can't get that image out of my head. So.
I gotta tell you, it's something you don't forget. Anyway, looking forward to next episode, coming back and finishing Streets of Poison.
All right. That sounds great.
All right, Bob, as always, it's been fun wrapping cap with you.
It has. I can't wait till next week.
All right, he's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbanis. And please, if you don't mind, please do rate and review and subscribe wherever you listen. If you're on YouTube right now, please hit that thumbs up button, leave us a comment, and maybe we'll play it here on the show. So As always, we thank you for listening to another episode of Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.